Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform combining infrastructure monitoring, application performance monitoring, and log management into a one-stop shop. Datadog helps leading companies migrate to the cloud, transform to a microservices architecture, or transition from .NET to .NET Core. Their distributed tracing and APM provide end-to-end visibility into requests wherever they go, across hosts, containers, and service boundaries. See for yourself. Start a 14-day trial today, and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Hello everyone, and welcome to the .NET Core podcast, the only podcast which is devoted to .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, EF Core, SignalR, and not forgetting the .NET Core community itself. I am your host, Jamie Gaprogman-Taylor, and this is episode 61, Being Productive with Jay Miller. In this episode, I spoke with Jay about what productivity can mean to different people with different backgrounds and in different technologies. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So, thank you ever so much, Jay, for taking some time out of your morning, my afternoon, to talk with me. I've already said that, and we've already joked off air that that's what I would say, because for those who don't know, Jay helps out a lot with the transcriptions. There's a piece of software that he wrote that we use for transcription, so there you go. But yeah, thank you for taking some time out. It's super early in the morning for you, and I really appreciate that, because it's not very easy to get up and go, oh no, I've got to talk to that Jamie this morning and it's crazy and I don't want to talk to him, because everybody feels that, right?
Oh, never, man. It's as much as we talk, I feel like me not talking to you on a regular basis, at least not, if not through voice, through text, it would just feel weird. Like, I think we talked every day for like a year. So, yeah. I mean, it's just a normal day, except for it's normally my day off. So, yeah, you're welcome, cool. Jamie. You're welcome.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I didn't realize that Friday was your day off, in which case I'd have said, why don't we do it later on? But, okay, no. That's fine.
It's a holiday, which means it's a work day for the other side of what I do, which I think is probably what we're going to talk a lot about.
Sure. Yeah, it's the, so for the people who are listening, there's a lot of time machine what did I call it before? Timecast pod machine wibbly wobbliness going on. We're recording at the beginning of the Independence Day weekend. So happy Independence Day, everyone. Which, I don't know, I feel like I should feel weird about that, being a British person talking to an American on the eve of Independence Day. But I don't. It's like, whatever, dude.
No, that's a requirement in America, is you have to call a British person you know and go, we're number one. I'm kidding to all of my friends in the UK. We're definitely not number one at the moment.
So I was just going to say we're independent, and then you could slam the phone down. But yeah, it's up to you really whether you want to do that. But there you go. Excellent. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the fact that you're joining me this morning, but we haven't really talked about kind of who you are. I don't wish that to sound horrible or anything, but could you maybe introduce yourself to the listeners? Because this one's going to be a bit of a different conversation to what we usually have, I think.
Absolutely. So, yeah, my name is Jay Miller. I am a Python developer, which is going to be interesting because the only thing I know about .NET and .NET Core and all of that stuff is what I've learned through transcribing these podcast episodes. So yeah, I use Python a lot to do marketing for developer creators. And that's not to mean people who built an app. That is people in the tech space, specifically developers who are creating content for developers. So folks like Jamie and a few of the other podcasters and YouTubers out there in the development space. Oh yeah, I should probably also say I'm a podcaster, and yeah, I'm the host of the Productivity and Tech podcast. This whole idea kind of spawned around that of like helping to make folks in tech more productive. And then I got like a reality shock from that, and we kept the name, but kind of changed the perspective of what it means to be a productive person in tech, which uh, I'm sure Jamie will not want us to talk a lot about because I berate him with that every single week.
Just because I'm not a very productive person in the technology space, that's all.
That's okay.
No, it's all good. No, I think that having the discussion about productivity is a very important one to have, regardless of whether you're in the tech space or if you are in the tech space, regardless of what technology you use or technologies you use to build things, right? Because it's not like productivity just kind of appeared when software development appeared, right? Productivity has been a thing for millennia. So the things that we as a society, as a group of people learned 4,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago are largely still going to be relevant, right? You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a designer, a technologist or anything like that to be able to really want to get into productivity and learn the productivity things, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it actually helps to not focus so hard on being productive to be productive. I think that those who tend to want to constantly adjust what they're doing in the sake of squeaking out an extra percent of efficiency often wind up slowing themselves down in some other way. I've learned that comfort happens to be one of the biggest factors in the effectiveness of a developer.
Sure, absolutely. I remember we had a chat only yesterday at the time of recording about I was feeling a bit down because I had a to-do list and managed to finish one thing, but got two-thirds of the way through another thing. But that other thing was taking 55 minutes of audio and producing text from it, which is not easy at the best of times. But yeah, I think you're right. Some people spend way too much time trying to eke out that extra 1%, whereas it's like, the old phrase, work smarter, not harder, right? My feeling is that in that instance, that person is maybe I am working way too hard, chasing after that tiny incremental addition. Whereas if I just work a little bit smarter and go, you know what, that 1%, in this instance, that 1% of that task doesn't really matter. Or it does, but getting it done right now doesn't really matter.
I think a good way to look at it is, say you're writing code that at the end of the day prints out a brick, and you have to write and now maintain another 1,000 lines of code to shave off 1 millisecond on that brick printing. Is it worth it? Like think about that. Like is it worth it? Is maintaining another 1,000 lines of code to shave off 1 millisecond worth it? And I think that's the frustration that a lot of people in general face when it comes to how can I be more productive. I'm an analog productivity person in terms of like managing my tasks or whatever. So for me, everything starts in a notebook, ends in a notebook. And when I'm, people are like, oh, there's this app, there's this tool, there's this thing, there's that thing. Trust me, I have an account for all of the things. I'm a productivity person by profession. Like I even do productivity coaching for developers, on the side when people ask of it. So it's one of those things that like I know of all of the different tips and tricks and hacks and things like that, but feeling comfortable in my system, trusting my system, understanding that my system is going to work, in my opinion, is more valuable than being able to say that I'm using this app and it's given me the wabi sabi that I need to feel comfortable or to feel most productive in my day to day. When what I'm really doing is I'm fighting against myself to retain information, to be able to retrieve information, and to be able to ultimately, the goal of productivity, to accomplish more.
Sure. I mean, I recently have become a convert to analog productivity tips. I do have a tablet that a lot of people I know in meat space, I guess, people I know in real life kind of get upset with me because I'm like, hey, this tablet is amazing. And I'm always telling them because I use it literally every day. I used to write out my to-do lists on that. Problem was that it's bigger than the size of A4 paper. And that means that my to-do list is massive. And, you know, I have grid lines on there, set them to the smallest grid lines possible. So I end up with a to-do list for each day that has like 200 tasks on them, and that's no good. So what I do these days, I was telling you, Jay, but I'm going to tell the listeners anyway. I get an A4 piece of paper and I fold it in half, and I'm going to show it to the camera. I know that people who are listening can't hear it, but I have a to-do list there that has maybe 10 items per day on it. Because just take a piece of A4 paper, fold it, and use one of the folded sides to write 10 to 15 things. And we talked about that when we had a call yesterday. But yeah, I find that is a lot better. Like focusing on the 10 to 15 things that really, that I guess would give me the wabi sabi. I feel like you may have to explain that so that I fully understand what I'm agreeing to.
So
is it even something that can be explained?
So wabi sabi, according to the great, Wikipedia, we'll give you a definition here. Wabi sabi is like the thing that makes something beautiful or like wonderful, and it's actually the imperfections in it. So that's the thing, is everyone has a reason why one app is better than another, or why one system is better than another. To me, I think that where retention is held is often in the friction of things. When everything runs smoothly, we don't want to understand why. We just accept that it is. So at the end of the day, when you have 25 tasks sitting in your task manager and they're all in there and you've added them in like the blink of an eye, and now they exist, it's just there. And it allows you to, just flood that thing with tasks, whether they're important or not, whether you really want to do them or not, whether they really need to be done or not. But now you have them and there's a level of anxiety. Whereas, when I think of the term of like wabi sabi, when you think of like the beautiful imperfection of it, a piece of paper is limited. It's limited in space. So you're only able to write down what will fit, which means as you're filling up your day, you can see there's a lot going on. And then even after that, once you start getting closer to the bottom, as more and more things are coming up, you can tell yourself, I'm not going to be able to tackle all of this. And it forces you to start thinking, maybe I should offload some of this stuff, or maybe I should delay this, or maybe I should just tell that person I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. And that's kind of what I mean by like the wabi-sabiness of it all. And we can even, turn that into an idea of like creating content for developers. One of the things that I often, remind content creators is that they are looked at as the subject matter expert, but that doesn't mean that they have to know it all or understand it all. They can take what they do know and position it from a spot of learning and say, this is what I've learned, and I'm open to learning more. And it creates a level of empathy with your listeners. When I am doing a podcast, even like a podcast like this, I don't want to assume that everything that I say is going to work for every single listener out there. It's just not. I also don't want to assume that what I'm saying is going to be gospel for all eternity. What I say is based on the experiences that I've had, and a lot of my conversations will recall from those experiences, but based on the experiences that I've had, these are the conclusions that I've drawn. And if there is a better way to do that, I invite the conversation to happen.
You see, I keep saying it, but that really does make a lot of sense. I think I talked to Richard Campbell, episode 18, I think, of the podcast, and he said that he tries to approach life with ontological humility, which is this ability to try and take a step outside of yourself and go, I'm looking at this situation, but I may not understand all of the facts, and I may not understand all of what's going on, and my perception of it is immediately flawed because I'm only seeing literally what's in front of me. I haven't seen what happened before. I don't understand the feelings of everyone involved. And I feel like that kind of fits with what you were saying there along the lines of, you said yourself, my understanding of this task, my background in using this system, using this tool, using this whatever, this anything, has shown me that in the past it has worked or it has not worked, and here are the reasons why. But if there is a different way to do it, then yeah, come and talk to me about it, because maybe I've misunderstood it, or perhaps maybe the other person has misunderstood it and they think that, oh yeah, all you have to do is this, this, and this, and then you point out to them, well, actually, this, and this doesn't actually work in the instance that I'm coming from. So I feel like it kind of helps both ways if you can have that conversation of, I know that my experience is limited, so let's talk about that. And I know maybe your experience will be limited, but perhaps in a different arena, or from a different angle, or from a different direction. So let's have a conversation about that.
One of the things that I learned when I served, I was in the U.S. Marine Corps. And during that time, I learned that there was a lot of direction was given, and the reasoning why was often left out. And I always kind of wondered why. And there's often so much stuff going on outside of what is visible to us that leads to decisions that we have to make whether we like them or not. And it wasn't until I was in a position of leadership that I saw that. And often the explanation was left out because the explanation would take too long. And in all honesty, when you're setting up, a good example of this, and this isn't classified or anything. I was doing a training exercise in Thailand, and we were doing a joint training with the Thai Marines, and there was a typhoon coming, and we had basically 36 hours to set up an emergency comms network. And the process of doing that, normally when you go out on a mission, everything is pre-prepared. You have all your keys and everything else. But, we went from here's all the training stuff that we're going to be using with one another to flip the script. Now we have to support, people in a whole nother country, setting up connections with them. And we're on a time crunch to do that. Like literally the training that we're doing has now become the real thing. The only problem is we don't have any of that information on hand. So then through a series of communications, a series of giving orders that may not make sense. Like, hey, go fill up sandbags. And you're like, well, we've got to get a network set up. And it's like, yeah, but there's also a typhoon coming. So it's like, we don't really have time to go into the details of why you have to be the one getting sandbags filled, because at the end of the day, if anything goes down, we're not able to support our mission. And I feel like that's the mentality that I want to avoid in the developer space. I have always had the perspective of, unless I am writing code that will literally save lives or, put out burning buildings, nothing that I'm doing is that critical that I can't provide a little bit of thought and a little bit of explanation for. And when it does, then by all means, we'll change direction and we'll start, giving out orders and without any explanation. But ultimately, a lot of leadership wants to react as if there's a typhoon coming when, quite frankly, there's just not. There's just no typhoon.
Sure. I have always found that having a little bit of context behind whatever it is that I'm doing, if it's some kind of tech work, if it's some kind of, I don't know, something around the house, something in like a professional environment, maybe I've got to fill in a document or take a test or something, or whatever it is, whatever task I've been given to do, if I have a little bit of context as to how it will help everyone achieve whatever they're trying to achieve, that helps me to approach the task I feel like I approach the task in a slightly different way. Like an example might be, I need you to create a component for a web view that allows you to simulate items traveling left to right and items traveling top to bottom. So imagine it's just drawing a grid on screen, right? And you might think, well, okay, fair enough, I'll go and make that. But then when I tell you actually what it's doing is it's representing the warping and wefting of a weave that is building some kind of fabric or taking some raw materials and making like a rug or something, right? That gives you a lot more context as to why it's useful to that person. And then that helps you to maybe make design decisions that maybe will help that person out when they're using it, or help another person out when they're integrating it into a system or reading data from it or showing it on screen, right? Because let's say that you're doing this warping and wefting and you have to help design some kind of pattern, and you're helping someone who has color blindness, and you don't know that it's for warping or wefting. You just know it's draw a line that goes left to right and draw a line that goes top to bottom. Well, you may do that with a black background and a white line, or a white background and a black line, but that might not be useful to the person who's using it. So I always feel that, getting some extra context in a task is always really useful. And I think that's one of the things that we have in our, so to give away a bit of a insider baseball, I believe is the term. We've planned a whole bunch of topics out, and one of those topics is, being able to talk about the problem beyond whatever equipment that you're using. We use the phrase tech stack in our notes when we were planning this, but let's say you are an engineer and you're building a bridge. Somebody says to you, why is it going to take 3 days? Well, okay, here is why, right? I need these tools, these frameworks, this help. I don't know about building bridges. I don't know that you can tell. But yeah, being able to talk outside of your own expertise, right? If you take your car into the mechanic and they start throwing loads of jargon around, you're just going to nod and go, yep, absolutely. That's a lot of jargon. I can totally understand why it's going to take that much money to fix my car. Whereas if the mechanic says to you, look, okay, so here's the deal. Okay. Your engine's broke. You're going to have to buy a new one and buy a new filter to make sure the gasoline going into it is kind of nice and clean. Because otherwise it all gets clogged up and it breaks, right? Who do you understand more? The person who stands there and talks jargon at you for 20 minutes, or the person who says, look, this is a problem and this is what we got to do?
Yeah, and even with that, interesting enough, we call this ability kind of like part of the soft skill set. And It's so frustrating. We should not call it soft. I mean, I think we literally wrote in the notes like it's harder than programming. Programming has a defined set. Like you said, it has a defined terminology. It has a consistency to it that makes it relatively easy to accomplish once you've learned. However, communication is very fluid. It's, I mean, the type of conversation, the type of empathy and compassion that you need to show someone can vary based on the effects, the things that have happened to that person, whether it be that morning, whether it be, through hundreds of years of systemic racism or exclusivity. There is a lot that goes to how we convey information, how we communicate to one another. And a lot of that is coming to light now with the conversation of removing phrases like, master and slave or blacklist and whitelist. And there's a lot that goes into that discussion of why it's important. And what I've often seen is to the people that don't feel like it's that important, it's almost as if they see it as a waste of time. Where what really happens is it creates a position of comfort for someone else. And like I said, what we've talked about now is being comfortable in the thing that you're doing. That is like the key to, in my opinion, the key to productive development is a level of comfort. So if for some person it doesn't matter, and for the other person it makes them an inkling more comfortable, would that not be a better solution than to once again write 1,000 lines of code to shave off 1 millisecond in production?
Yeah. You kind of caught me out there, Jay. I agree. At the end of the day, it's all about shipping or building or reaching that goal. Like you said, being productive. And so if someone is uncomfortable, they're not going to be as productive. So let's change if it's changed the whole system, if it's changed this one thing that one person doesn't care about, but everybody else does, then let's change it. Let's have that conversation, because it's all about meeting the other people at their, I don't want to say level. I don't want to put people on different levels, but meeting people where they are, coming to them or them coming to you and saying, look, okay, this is no good. I hate to bring it up, but let's use the master-slave thing, right? We talk about in source control, we have a master branch, which is the sort of main branch where everything lives. But obviously, master is a word that implies slave, which implies a whole bunch of really horrible things, right? So let's just rename that. Let's call it main. Let's call it unicorn. Let's call it, I don't know, anything, right? It doesn't have to be called master. It can be called literally anything. And like you say, for the people who think it doesn't matter, let them think it doesn't matter. They will literally never see that name. But for the people who do think it matters, they'll see that every day, right? And it will just be another little, like, I don't want to say microaggression, because I don't think that's the correct word, but it's another little thing that makes you even more upset or that can make you less likely to get the work done, to distract you from whatever task you're trying to do. Let's have that conversation. Let's change it if it needs to, I'm sitting here as, a white person, a Caucasian person going, I have no experience of these things, but let's have this conversation. Let's talk about it. Because if it means that, I don't want to bring up the history and the horrendousness of the humanity. But if something is causing you harm, if it's causing you to not want to, causing you to not want to do the work, causing you to be unable to do the work, let's figure out a new way, right? If you've got someone coming into your office who is in some way physically disabled, and you have 4 flights of stairs for them to climb up before they can get into your office, let's change that, and I'm using that as an example, right? The disability you can see, words, phrases. One of the people that I talked to in an earlier episode of the podcast, John Skeet, he's a very big proponent for inclusivity and equality for everyone and all that kind of stuff, right? Or rather, he's a very big proponent for inclusivity, diversity, and lovely things like that, because they are lovely things like that. And I said to him, how do you feel about the use of the word guys? Because I feel, I've stopped using it because I know that it can cause issues to certain groups of people, or to people with a certain background, or to people who identify in certain ways. So I've stopped using it. I try to use the word folks, but then maybe that's not the right word. And he said to me, what's really interesting is you see it more, at least from his perspective, in America. And you see it more being used by people who are feminine presenting in America, which is just that wonderful, weird, words are words, right? To someone like me who it doesn't hurt to hear that. A word is a word. But practicing that ontological humility, taking that step back and saying, look, is this situation even slightly wobbly? What could be going on here? I can see that maybe without trying, without wanting to, some of the words and actions and things that I do and say could potentially hurt someone. So let's take a moment to fix that, right?
As a cisgendered black male in America, I can't speak to the position that, and I use folks as well, or a good friend of mine, Kenneth Love, gave a wonderful talk about teaching, and in it he mentions embracing the y'all, especially when you're a Southern American. you can just say y'all and it works. The thing that I have learned to do, and this is, we've talked about this a little bit, Jamie, and we can even use this to kind of talk a little bit more about like the podcastingness of things, is making the other person feel as comfortable as they want to be. And one of the things that I've done in my podcast as we get started is I verify a person's name, how it's pronounced, what they would like to be called, and then I also verify their pronouns. And I don't come in with any expectation. I don't say, all right, we're talking with, is it Jamie Taylor and your pronouns are he, him, and his? And I say, okay, is it pronounced Jamie Taylor? Yes. Okay, what pronouns would you like me to use? And by doing that, it is making it so that it is not a big deal. It is, I am doing this. I'm coming in with zero expectation, with zero implicit bias. It is just flat out, this is the process. This is what we do. And that, in my opinion, is the best way to approach many of these things. It is not a position of, well, this is my opinion, or da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay, this policy that we have adopted is designed to make people of all types as comfortable as possible. And when we find that there is an issue, then we revise the process.
That's it, right? It's like the continual review of how you're able to, I don't want to say onboard a person, but the way that you're greeting and behaving around other people, right? The way that I'm greeting and behaving around other people. I don't want to put anyone else on the spot. Let's put me on the spot. Continually reviewing how I greet and approach and communicate with other people can be hard, but in the end, it works out really well for everyone, because once you get into the habit of doing it, then, for some people, it will maybe come off as a little bit annoying to ask these questions. But do you know what? If it helps one person feel more comfortable, I'm all for it. If it helps one person be more productive in whatever they're doing, I am all for it. Right? like I said earlier on, I don't. How do I put it? Whilst I can appreciate some of the issues that a lot of people face, I maybe haven't faced them, and I'm always really conscious of saying things like that because I'm very aware of that. Let's call it what it is, that privilege, that ability to not have to worry about, oh, well, this person's going to call me this, and this person's going to call me that, and this person's going to expect this of me, and this person's going to expect that of me. Don't have to worry about that, I guess. But then that puts me in a worrisome position where I'm thinking, am I expecting this from someone? Am I behaving in a way that would make them upset because I'm expecting them to behave this way, or I am enforcing this this language, these behaviors, these expectations on people.
I think we just solved systemic racism and inclusivity problems in tech, didn't we? No, not at all.
Not even slightly.
Oh man, yeah. Of course, it's always going to be an uphill battle until one day it no longer is. But I think that at the end of the day, at least giving the effort and truly giving the effort, that I think that's the thing, is like, don't just say, oh, well, I'm trying. It's like, no. What are you doing to try? let's really examine that, because I think that until it is really examined, you can't say that you're trying. It's like, oh yeah, no, I'm not racist. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, not being racist sometimes isn't enough. But again, I don't think that we can discuss WinForms and config files and all of those other wonderful .NET-isms and also solve the tech inclusivity problem in one podcast episode.
Yeah, it's the way that I always say it is, it's for people who are way smarter than I am to figure out, and that's not me trying to sound big-headed. That's me saying I am going to help out in whatever way I can, and I will try and present any ideas that I have. But it's because I know that I'm from that background of having that privilege. I feel like I can be involved in the conversation, and I can be involved in the supporting of the ideas and the actioning of those ideas. But I can't stand here and say, oh, well, this group of people who are represented by this thing need to behave like this or need to be talked to in this way. No, I can't do that. I'm not, unless I'm in that group. And even then, that's my opinion as one person within a group. That's not the group as a collective group of people. That's one person, right? So I can't. I feel like I can't be involved in that. Let's change this. Let's change that. If other people want to tell me you got to change this, okay, let's change this then. That's absolutely.
Sure.
At least that's how I feel about it, right? It's just, for me, it's a very hairy and scary situation, although it shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be a scary situation, but I feel like it can be for people from maybe my background or my experience. But there you go. So one of the things that we've wanted to talk about in our planning notes is we did want to talk about how to break into the scene. Would you like to talk about that, or would you like to skip over that one for now? How do you feel?
No, let's
just because I can see your cursor. You see on the notes.
Oh no. Let's jump into it. So, and funny enough, when we talk about breaking into the scene, spoiler alert for those that don't know of my backstory, I am by trade a marketer. Like I report to a marketing department in my day job, and I often use code to either automate processes or expand on the capabilities of what my team can do. So when we talk about breaking into the tech scene, it is truly coming from a position of I am trying to break in to the tech scene. Like I am a person on the outside trying to make my way into the professional development space. And what does that look like? I think that there are a lot of folks out there that are not coming from traditional computer science backgrounds. There are people that are not coming from positions of higher education or higher learning. And I hate that phrase, higher learning. I mean, someone can continue to learn whether they went to college or not. But that's a whole nother problem that we don't have enough time to solve today. The idea is, how can someone that is at a disadvantage for whatever reason find a way to get themselves injected into the space? And I'm saying that from a position of, in a traditional sense, I would not be in the tech space. Although, when you look at the code that I write, when you look at the packages that I maintain, when you look at the people that I work with and sometimes for, it is quite clear that I am in the space. I am a developer in the space. And how do you get there? Well, I like to think of it as kind of an Ocean's 11 type thing. A lot of people will say, oh, you've got to market yourself. Oh, a lot of people will say, oh, you need to make sure your resume talks about this and these things. The thing that has been the most important factor in my limited success has been the people that I put around myself and how we all work together to achieve a number of goals, not just my own personal goals, but also goals that help everyone. And I've learned that by having your own specific skill set, as Liam Neeson would say, a certain set of skills, and applying them in a way that you're able to help those around you, it is often reciprocated back to you. And a good case of that is, again, the idea of doing transcriptions and editing podcasts. I mean, I've been podcasting for 6, 7 years now, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, some number of years. And I grew up with an audio background. I have family members who are in the music business, who are producers, who, I grew up on, mixers and turntables and things like that. So like, audio is a thing that I am comfortable with. So using my ability to work with audio allows me to help others in this space who aren't comfortable working with audio all the time. And in return, they're often in a position to where if they know that I'm looking for work or if I'm looking for clients or something, without even asking, they may say, oh, hey, I know of someone else that you might be able to help. And again, it's not the idea of I'm doing this to be benefited by the work that I'm doing. It's I'm doing this because I want to be an effective member of the community, and this is the skill set that I can apply. Now, whether or not you're putting a price tag on that, that is entirely up to you. And that, I mean, sure, I have no problem with people getting paid for the work that they do. I also think that we have to come at it from a position of we are all a part of this team trying to accomplish whatever goal that it is. We all have our own reasons for accomplishing that goal, but we all have a goal that we are trying to accomplish. So let's work together to do it.
Are You a Dev is the only program exclusively for .NET developers. Learn how to prototype, code, launch, and market your mobile app product, whether you're an indie developer starting out or a dev lead wanting to bring mobile development in-house. Interested in ML.NET? Are You a Dev shows how to utilize ML.NET in your mobile product, walking you through the code, functional limitations, and the privacy implications you need to be aware of when using machine learning. Try out the program for free at ruadev.com. That's AREYOUADEV.com. And get a complimentary 20-minute one-to-one chat with a fellow developer to ask any program or technical questions. Absolutely. So the way that we have to, like you said, it's a community, right? Whether that's a community of Python developers and a separate community of .NET developers and a separate community of C developers and a separate community of JavaScript developers and a separate community of this, that, and the other, or whether it's, hey, we're all solving similar problems, because just like in storytelling, there's like 6 stories and you just jumble the details up. We're likely all solving essentially the same problems every day. So why don't we all sort of sit together and say, hey, okay, so, I mean, we brought it up at the beginning, right? I'm a .NET dev, you're a Python dev, but we can still speak the same language. We can still talk about the problems that we're solving, and we could talk about how we're solving them, right? And there have been times before where I've talked to you and said, oh, well, how does this work in Python? And you've said, oh, it's like this. And I'm like, oh, that is almost exactly how we do it in .NET. Here it is, right? Because, spoiler alert, there's only so many ways to solve the same problem. So getting that community there and not having... I'm always a little bit upset when I see different technologists or different developers, different tech people being sort of like, ours is the one true way, ours is the one true framework, and if you're doing it like this, then you're wasting your time. And I'm like, no, what you're doing there is you're gatekeeping. You're telling people they have to do it your way, otherwise they're not a real developer. And hopefully you can hear those bunny quotes. See it all the time in video gaming, right? There's a conversation I had with my brother very recently about easy mode in video games, and you know, he's told me that there are people who've told him, oh, you're not a real gamer, in bunny quotes, because you play on easy. And I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, you're not a real developer unless you're using vanilla JavaScript instead of using jQuery. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. What you're telling that person is that in some way they are inferior to you because they do it differently to you. It's because we do it differently. It doesn't mean that anyone's inferior or superior. And just with having that inferior superiority, it's no longer a community. It's everyone has to like kowtow to this person and then say that this person is better than everyone else. And that doesn't help with bringing people together and sharing that knowledge. I was going to say upskilling. I don't think that's the right word, but sharing that knowledge, right? Because you have to remember that all of the things that we do, everything we do in tech, in this tech space, all came from, let's figure out if I put these 2 electrodes together, what happens, right? It's not, I'm going to build the best thing ever. It's like, I wonder what happens if we put this diode in the same circuit as this. Can you tell it's been a long time since I did electronics? But it is just that. It's let's mix all these things up, jumble these things up, and see what comes out the other end. Oh, wow. Can we change it slightly to make it faster, slower, bigger, smaller? What can we do to it, right? Everything that we do comes out of experimentation. And just because some other person has read the documentation and gets the theory as to why it works, that doesn't mean that they're smarter or better than you, or just because you've done it, or just because I've done it. It means that I've taken the time to go read the documentation. It doesn't mean that I'm any better or something, because it could be that I'm really good at applying the theory, but I'm actually no good at doing it in real life. But the biggest thing, I think you hinted at it there, is get a bunch of people together, right? Get into a community. It's so difficult to find one, right? I've had conversations with people before about, well, I want to get into development, but I know that there are at least 3 programming languages. Which one do I pick? And that's like the hardest thing, because once you pick this, it's like choosing your first car, right? You have a whole bunch of people say, oh, well, don't buy this kind of car because that kind of car is no good because I've had 3 of those in the past and they're all terrible. Go for this one. And you say, well, why? And they go, well, because it's not useful, right? But I do know someone who has gone from being completely outside of the tech space and has become really quite prolific in that tech space. And that's a gentleman by the name of Wang. and it's been a pleasure just watching his knowledge grow over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. He went from being in banking to being this incredibly well-versed, very, very knowledgeable gentleman who does a whole bunch of stuff. And and the way he did that was he started quite literally, like you were saying, let's find a community to join and start asking questions. Hey, Jay, how does this work? Hey, Jamie, how does that work? And I mean, I can go back through a bunch of conversations in Slack and Twitter and all that kind of stuff and see those questions being asked and see all of the different people all sort of coming together to answer those questions. And that's the important thing. It's finding that community that's inclusive. Even if it's just like 3 people who are going, yeah, come on over. And just being able to answer those questions. Or is it? I mean, I don't know. I've gone down the university route, right? So I don't know whether that's the right answer.
No, I think that it is, and I'm a fan of Sean as well. Amazing work that he's doing, but I think that you talked about the idea of like, where do I get started, and to me, like that is a question that, there is no wrong answer. Just start. Like, how do I get started? Just start. Okay. Wherever you want. Like there's a lot of gatekeeping that's done at the very beginning that is, in my opinion, not necessary. We can have more developers. Trust me, there are plenty of jobs out there for developers. I see them every day. It's fine if that person doesn't go and start as an intern at some company and is writing documentation out the gate. There is a conversation to be had about mentorship in the development space. I wouldn't be where I am today as a developer without the mentors that I've had in my lifetime. The people that have taken time out to look at the code that I've written and told me, not this code is garbage, but here is where you may run into problems with this code. And again, it goes all back to those skills of compassion and empathy of like the person who writes a blog post about something that they learned doesn't need your comment of, oh, well, that's so inefficient in Python. You should really be doing it in Golang because Go compiles and is faster and runs closer to the metal, or you should do it in assembly because assembly is the lowest of the, all of that conversation is so unnecessary. To me, it's almost as if programming is truly just storytelling. The language that is used in storytelling can be different, but the stories can be the same. We see this a lot in mythology. If you look at like Greek mythology versus Roman mythology, many of the gods are the same. They just have different names. And some of those fantastic stories that are taught all throughout culture and civilizations as a whole are ultimately saying the same thing, but they're using different language to convey the creation of a thing. And I think that is what we are doing as developers. We are storytellers. The code that we write is the story that we are writing for our users. And when we look at it that way, it makes perfect sense. Sometimes you have to do a little setup. You have to provide a little backstory just to make sure that everything is going to connect properly. You have to tie things together using a little bit of structure. And, I'm not going to dive too deep into the metaphor because then we will all get lost in it. But I think that without the ability to let people operate in the comfort that they are in, we miss out on the story. I would much rather have code written in React or Golang or .NET Core. What are y'all on now? Like 5, 6, something like that. Or Python 3. Not Python 2. Python 2's dead. But I would rather have the story told in whatever language it is. And then later, maybe it can be translated. But I would rather have that story told in its language than not told at all.
Absolutely. You can learn the principles of programming in any language, right? They all have for loops. They all have conditional expressions. They all have support for regular expressions. They all have all of the things that are required to make a programming language. Every single programming language has them. So if you start in JavaScript, brilliant. You know what's great about JavaScript? You don't need to install anything. You open up your browser, you hit F12, you have a JavaScript environment. You start in Python, okay, so you may have to install Python's runtime to be able to get it to work. And there may be some issues with that. There may not. It might be completely seamless. I have no idea. If you want to start with .NET, okay, you've got to download and install a tool, and then you're off to the races. You want to do C, it starts to get a bit difficult, right? Because if you're on Windows, if you're on Mac, if you're on Linux, different tools, different tool sets, you produce a binary in one, it ain't going to work on another machine, right? Whereas JavaScript, Python, .NET, yeah, okay, Go, all of these different languages, they are more or less cross-compatible. If you're working on a Mac and you have to then work on Windows, or if you're working on Windows and then you have to work on Mac, you can just literally take your code with you and it just works, right? There might be some wobbliness around the edges, but it just works. And that's what's great about them. It doesn't matter which one you're in. And like you say, it's so much better to see someone starting, because starting out is really scary to do. And then you get past that point, right? So you go, right, I'm going to learn JavaScript, and you start learning JavaScript and you figure out, oh wow, okay, so I can split a program into functions and I have to call the function to get the output. Okay, I've got that far. I'm going to write a blog post about it. That's even scarier, right? You go and write all this, but hey, I'm starting my JavaScript journey. These are the things that I've done. And then, like you say, someone comes along and starts going, oh, well, you haven't used arrow syntax, so your code's all useless. And it's like, well, that hasn't helped that person to learn, right? I remember watching a live stream of someone setting up a Linux virtual machine on their computer. And they're sitting there reading the documentation, and they're like, right, I understand this. They pull down an ISO file, which it is essentially a CD, but as a file, the installation media, and they start going through the process. Someone jumps into the comments and say, why are you installing this Linux distribution? Or why are you installing it this way? That way is really bad. You should be installing this one. And it's like, dude, you're not helping that person learn how to do the task that they are doing, right? Saying that, it's like you're using, I don't know, a screwdriver to drive a screw into a wall, right? You're putting up some shelves. Someone comes along and goes, that's no good. You shouldn't be using a shelf. You should be using something else. It's like, well, that doesn't help me put the shelf up, does it? Right? That doesn't help me learn to put the shelf up. And so that level of gatekeeping really, like you say, it's not needed. And it really infuriates me when I see it. It's like, well, think about trying to help the person. And even if you're not being that mentor person, just saying, hey, that's great. Did you also know about this? If not, give me a yell and we could talk about it, right? One of my friends, Zach Brady, I once saw him in a Slack conversation. He was chatting with someone. Someone was saying, I'm really stuck with this code. Can someone help me? And he sort of jumped in and went, you know what? Give me 5 minutes. Let's start up a private conversation, and I will talk you through whatever it is that you're stuck with. And that's what he did. He didn't say, a lot of people were jumping in and saying, you shouldn't be using this library, you shouldn't be using that framework, shouldn't be using this language. And this person was like, well, those are the things I'm learning, right? You're not helping me to learn. And if you're not going to help me, then there's no point me being here. And then, yeah, Zach jumped in and went, right, let's go talk about this and figure this out. And that's what it's about. It's helping people, right? Because I'll guarantee that even in my own experience, right, I didn't get to where I am today without someone helping me. If that's a university lecturer, if that's someone that I've talked to at a hackathon, someone who's written documentation, someone who I've just turned to and said, I just don't get it. And they've said, okay, take a step back. This is how it works, right? You need other people to help you understand something, because it's, at the very least, another person has created the thing and they've tried to put it across to you in a way that you'll understand. So you need other people. So pay that back, pay that forward even, right? Find someone and say, hey, do you want to learn how to code? Let me show you how I learned. Might not be the best way, but let me show you this, right? And we'll talk through this. Totally get it. That's what we should be doing, right? Share that knowledge, share the experience, and share the excitement. Don't upset someone. Don't try and stop them from being excited about coding or any kind of work. Somebody's getting into design, somebody's getting into manufacturing or mechanics or whatever it is. Do whatever you can to help foster that excitement, that enthusiasm, because that excitement and enthusiasm is going to pull them through when things get difficult to figure out, when things get difficult to do. You need that excitement and that enthusiasm to get you to the other side. And if someone, before you even start, is saying, you shouldn't be excited about this, you shouldn't be enthused about that, well, you're never even going to get to the point where it gets difficult to do. You're going to get turned off from the beginning, right?
Absolutely. And I am just truly amazed at what people are able to do with the knowledge that they do have. And I think that's the thing, is some of the best songs ever, in my opinion, were made with very little instruments. I mean, if you think about it, like, if you look at the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which is 3 people, a bass guitar, an electric guitar, and a drum. And then you look at, like, the London Philharmonic or something, something like that. You see inspiration taken from both. I tell people the first program that I truly made was one that just used regular expressions to rip URLs out of a chat log. And the excitement in the eyes of all of those other beginning developers. I mean, this was literally a user group for people who are just learning how to use Python. And the excitement that someone who had literally a week of Python experience was able to create something that was useful immediately to the community. Again, being able to give back based on the skill set that you have. Was it inefficient? Oh yeah, absolutely, it was inefficient. It was terrible, horrible code. But at the same time, it was the code that I had. If I were to build that same thing now, it would be completely different. It would be a completely different story. I mean, that's what happens as we get more experienced, as we learn more things. But if you shut the door in someone's face because the story that they tell at the beginning, at the infancy of their development career, then they never have time to develop some of those isms and those other things that will make their storytelling better. And I think about that from, like, the idea of look at the stories that are told throughout history, and then look at what Disney has done to them. Like, you have these amazing stories like Pinocchio and things like that. They were originally told one way. Over time, they developed into another story. And then you have someone that has a level of storytelling that is rivaled only by, like, the likes of, like, Miyazaki that can take a story and make it feel like it's its own original thing. And I mean, there's a little bit of controversy in that of, like, why is Disney ripping off, cultures and stuff? But, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the skill set. Had the story never been told, we wouldn't have the likes of Pinocchio. We wouldn't have the likes of The Lion King, although they say that's an original story. I beg to differ. We wouldn't have a lot of those stories that have been told if the origins were never around. I've built things and then later on gone to make them better. I've built things and then like later on gone to destroy them and build a stronger foundation for the thing that I built originally. That is one of my active projects now. Like I literally destroyed a web application that does transcriptions so that I could focus on building the framework for working with those transcriptions. It allows us, once we have the knowledge, to then expand on that knowledge. And that's when amazing stories are told.
Absolutely. And the important thing to remember, this is a scary thing to remember, because you're going to say, well, I've got to learn every day. But yeah, working in the tech space, whether you are a developer, a designer, a project manager, or whatever it is that you do as a technology worker, I guess, working in this tech space, you are constantly learning. And if that means that someone's got to constantly teach someone, then someone's got to constantly teach someone, right? The reason that I go to conferences and talks and meetups, that's one great thing to say, right? If you want to get into this business, unfortunately we can't right now because there is a situation that is happening that means that a lot of people can't move about so freely and can't meet up in huge groups. But when that whole situation has ended, go find a meetup group that is for new developers. There's one that I attend every so often in the big city near where I live, and it's just literally, hey, if you want to learn a language or framework and you want to get started with it, someone here will be able to do that. Or if you're building something and you're new to it, come over and we'll try and help you the best we can. It's wonderful. All these people just exchanging ideas and thoughts and teaching each other and mentoring each other. And you get like, I walked in as, a senior .NET person, and I was like, I have no idea about WordPress. Can someone teach me some PHP, please? And this person who's had a year of PHP experience, which is infinitely more than I've had. So in my eyes, they're the senior. But they've been involved in development for just over a year. They came and sat with me and went, right, okay, here is how it works. This is the tool you need. This is how the framework works. This is the language. This is how it all fits together. And anyone who has slightly more knowledge than another person can teach the other person. Or someone who has more knowledge than someone else can be taught by the person who has less knowledge, because we all have those gaps in our knowledge, right? And that's what it's all about. Just share those ideas. Share it all. I can't remember the original point I was going to, but I just love to talk about stuff like that. Share the ideas.
Well, speaking of sharing the ideas, I mean, one of the things that we both do is we share our ideas through podcasting. And I know that that is, in our notes, we say the person with the mic is the expert. They are in whatever it is that they're talking about. Now, of course, that comes with the caveat of what is the message that they're spreading. So that said, if you're using your mic to spread hate, you're the expert in hate. So yeah, there's that. But what we do in the art of podcasting is we share the experiences of others, at least in the type of podcast that you and I do, Jamie, as interviewers. We are really there to highlight the expertise of those within our community. And I would encourage anybody, if you feel like you have learned a thing and you don't have an outlet to share that with your community, try to get on a podcast. And if you can't find a podcast about the thing that you're doing, start your own. I mean, I tell people that it is, podcasts are easy to create and hard to be proficient at, I guess, as someone who has had many podcasts that have come and gone and has done a few of them with Jamie that have never seen the light of day, and many more that will probably happen eventually one day. Jamie, hashtag talking to Jay, hashtag gonna happen, hashtag we're gonna make it.
That's it.
But it's like giving talks without the CFP process. No one can tell you that you can't talk about a thing when you own the format. You know, when it's your show, no one can not tell you that you can't talk about it. And again, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because whatever you're talking about, you are now considered the expert on. So you can talk about something that's wrong. You'll be the expert in being wrong, I guess. But at the same time, having that place to be vocal and be seen, whether you're seen by one or seen by 1 million, you know, both of us have had podcasts of varying success. And what I've learned is it's usually the ones that are not as successful as the primary focus that I have the most fun with, having conversations that I would not have otherwise, and putting myself in a position of, I am now learning from the person that I have given not control over my podcast, but like given the venue, given the opportunity to learn from, as a podcaster.
Absolutely. I always talk to people and say, talk to me about the thing that you've built, or the way that you've built something, or some tool that you've used, or some process that you've used. Because whilst, like, I am not an expert, I will never be an expert in Python, right? But I can say, hey, I've built a string using Python, and here is how I did it, right? I used F strings, right? Which is a thing for, I'm sure Jay could talk your ear off about it, but I've used an F string to build a string, which is fabulous. And this is how I did it. And you know what? I've shared that knowledge now. Or I haven't just now, but I can then share that knowledge, and someone who has never used F strings before will go, oh, cool, there's this thing. I can go look it up and find out what it is, because 99% of the battle of learning something is knowing that there's something to learn. Because if you don't have, I think it was Donald Rumsfeld who said there are known unknowns, there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, which is going to be that's going to play hell with the transcriptor, but but that's that case of, there are things that you know, things that you know that you don't know, and things that you don't know that you don't know. It wasn't his idea, but he got to the point really quickly, a lot quicker than I did. And the majority of knowledge about something, when you're first learning it, you have no idea what it can and can't do, what it is and what it isn't. But knowing that there is this thing that you can then go, oh, I will turn to Google, or turn to Bing, or turn to DuckDuckGo, or whatever, and I'll go and read a book. I'll go get the book and read the book, if you really want to go that way. Knowing that there is something to look for really helps. And so I always say to people, I've had people come to me and say, I've reached out to them and they've said, I don't feel like I'm an expert in what you're asking me to talk about. And I say, it's not about being an expert. If you feel comfortable with it, tell me what it is that you've done with this thing, and we'll have a conversation about that. If I ask you a question you can't answer, fine, we'll get rid of that question. Right? Because that's what it is, sharing your knowledge with everyone else. And then you can then use that to bootstrap your own knowledge, right? If I want to sit here and talk about Python and how, how it's compiled, but not in the same sense as C is compiled down to a binary that is for your operating system and for your architecture, your CPU architecture. It is compiled into almost like an intermediary language, I believe. I've probably got that completely wrong. There'll be someone who comes to me and says, Jamie, you got that wrong. And I'll say, you know what? It's good. I like it. I like that you've pointed out that I've got that wrong, because that shows that there's a gap in my knowledge and I'm going to go learn it. Right? So if I started a show on Python, maybe hashtag Let's Learn Python, But if I started a show on Python and I started sharing, hey, this is what I've learned this week, then that it serves two purposes. One, it's helping to reinforce my own knowledge. And two, it's helping someone else who wants to then start to learn Python to know which direction I went down when learning Python. It might not be the same direction they go, but hey, there's this extra supplemental information. Why not, right? Start your own podcast. It's free. Well, it's not free. There is a cost. But if you, I've said it in a talk I gave not very long ago. If you have a laptop, that's got a microphone built in. It won't sound brilliant, but hey, you've got 99% of everything you need in order to create a podcast. Go do it.
Yeah, and you're allowed to get better. Like that, I mean, it's not like it has to be perfect out the gate. And in fact, perfection is perfection is the enemy of completion or something like that. Like if you're constantly just trying to make it perfect, it'll never go out. It took me, my first podcast, a funny story, and I know we're running kind of long here. But my first podcast that I did, the first podcast interview that I did, I literally ran out to, no, I didn't literally run. I literally got in my car and drove to the electronics store to grab a $100 microphone. And on the way back, I noticed that a part was missing and had to drive back to the store, get it returned, get a new one, and then drive back and set up for a podcast that had, no sound proofing and all that stuff. And I recorded in an office space, and listening to it now is kind of jarring. Whereas several years in, I'm no longer talking through that one microphone. I'm talking through, much more expensive equipment. But I used that setup for the first 3 or 4 years and slowly found ways to make it better over time. And now I've used that knowledge in making purchasing decisions for continuing in podcasting. I've used that knowledge in ideas for how I can spin a show and what I can do with the show and the way that I promote it and advertise it and do all those things. But I started out even finding people to interview. It was literally me going on Twitter where I had a couple hundred people that followed me and said, hey, I want to do a podcast about this. Is anybody interested in coming on and talking about it? And I got a few people that said, yeah, let's do it. And then those people wound up to later on be way more successful than I am. And, it's amazing that, sometimes I've had one person say, hey, you gave me my start in the industry by just offering me a place to talk. And that to me is the beauty of podcasting. Whether you're talking to, like I said, 1 or 1 million, the thing that you do can launch your career. It could launch the career of someone else. It could validate someone who feels invalidated. It could spark the idea of getting into the industry. I've had that conversation with someone before where they listened to an interview that I did with someone else on their show, not even my own. And they said, hearing your story of how you got into tech made me decide that I was going to focus on getting into tech. And it's just wow, that's amazing. But denying the world of your voice prevents those things from ever happening. And maybe someone else fills that space where that you're leaving void, but maybe not.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a similar story to the one you told about how that first interview, you said you ran out and bought a microphone and eventually got it set up and used that for a while. I had to look it up whilst you were talking then, Jay. The very first podcast interview I ever did was for a show called The Cynical Developer, and it was episode 8. called .NET to the Core, and I remember it very, very well. And if you listen back to it, the host, James, sounds amazing. I sound dreadful because what I did was I set up my Mac Air, plugged a pair of headphones into it, and spoke into the keyboard because there's a microphone under there because I didn't have a microphone. And that's literally how I did it. Went from that to buying a piece of hardware that is a microphone and is not very good, and then moved up to the next one and moved up to the next one. That continual slow improvement. And whether that's in podcasting, in tech work, in your day-to-day work, in helping raise kids, in doing the dishes, in whatever it is that you do that you want to improve in, remembering that it's that there's a Japanese term called Kaizen, which is that continual improvement, but through tiny steps. Don't go from I'm not a developer to I want to write the AAA title that will be released by the biggest companies and I will make millions of dollars. That chasm is way too big to jump across. But if you want to go from I have no development experience to I have written a JavaScript game that runs inside the browser that I can send someone a link to and they can have loads of fun playing it, that chasm is not as big as jumping straight to I've released something on the PlayStation and it is a bestseller and I've made millions of dollars. It's still a big chasm, but it's not as big. And then you break that down even further. Okay, so I've got to make something that runs in the browser. So I've got to work out how to get something running in the browser. So tiny improvement steps, tiny incremental improvement steps. That's how we get to where we are. It's not, how do I put it? People always see the end result, right? Big story in podcasting over the past few weeks has been Joe Rogan makes $1 million or $1 billion or some insane amount of money by moving his show over to Spotify. And that's all people are focusing on is this one window in which a person has moved something and made loads of money. They don't realize that there's been years of work gone into it and there's a whole team with that person, right? They don't see all that. They see the person at the end has done this one big thing and they're brilliant at it. What they don't see is the blood, sweat and tears of figuring out how to get it working or figuring out who to hire to get it working, right? A lot of my favorite podcasts who are done by, really famous people or big names in the industry, always at the end of their shows always go, okay, so the tech person for this episode was this person. Thanks go out to the producer and the director, and they literally list every single person who was involved in making it. And it's never that one person. It's maybe a team of 4 to 10 to 20 people. And then there's even the people who are doing the social and stuff like that. So don't worry about, I have to be the best at everything. Start small and work up. Don't look at the final, it's like pick your favorite musical artist. Don't look at the final, the most recent album or whatever and go, wow, I want to go from 0 to that, because you can't. You've got to rewind 30 years and watch them at talent shows and see them being really bad at what they do. But then maybe they've recorded it and listened back to it and gone, right, I need to change this, I need to change that. And those tiny incremental changes have made them into the person they are today. It's not, I was born with some ability or some talent or some skill. It's this, I've slowly made it better. They may have been born with some kind of skill or talent that's inbuilt, but they've improved on it. No one wakes up one morning and is just able to speak another language. I mean, okay, so there are some neurological issues that can lead to that, but no one just wakes up and goes, right, today I'm going to learn Mandarin Chinese, and then they do it, right? No one's going to wake up and go, I'm going to be the best podcaster ever. No one's going to wake up and go, I am the best developer ever, and just do it, because it doesn't work like that. And so slowly building towards it is where you want to be. That's what I think anyway. But yeah, allowing yourself to get better is the important thing. Allowing yourself to not be as good as maybe you think you want to be. Recognizing that and looking for ways to improve. I think that's the important thing.
Definitely. I mean, I couldn't say it any better.
I mean, I said it in about 5 million words and used about 12 examples there. I'm sure that a bunch of people could, write in and let us know how many examples I just used.
just start. That's the thing. Just start.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that A habit is a thing that you do unconsciously. A routine is a thing that you do deliberately. Make it your routine of sharing the information that you have in whatever method. I know we talk about podcasting, but this is coming from the perspective of two podcasters. You know, if we wrote blogs and maintained blogs on a regular basis, we would say, write that blog. Or if we did YouTube videos, we would say, make that video. Or if we did, keynotes, we would say, do that keynote. Okay, I'm getting out of control here. But the idea is whatever method you use to share knowledge, share it. I've talked with people who use TikTok to convey key points in the developer journey, and it resonates with a certain group of people. I'm not one for TikTok, but I enjoy those videos when they show up on Twitter. But it may not be for me, and that's okay. Everything you make doesn't have to be for everybody. Again, my traditional story is I didn't start making money from podcasting, and you can't hear the bunny quotes in that one as well, because the quote unquote money that I make from podcasting goes right back into my podcasting. But I didn't start being paid to make a podcast until I stopped trying to make my podcast for everybody and started making it for the people that it was for. And that's fine. If you want to make a podcast about, my example is always, yodeling in, normally I would say LA, but since we're an international podcast now, if you want to yodel in Leeds, go yodel in Leeds, and then do a podcast called Yodeling in Leeds. And if you want to, do something called tap dancing in Scotland, tapping Scottish, sure, whatever it is that you want to share, just share it. The format isn't important. The topic isn't necessarily important. As long as it's important to you, just go do that thing. Make it your routine. Make it be cognizant of, I am deliberately doing this thing because I want to share it with whoever it is intended to be shared with.
Absolutely. And that's I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is to find, I don't want to say to find that audience, because that's so difficult to do anyway. But yeah, to create the thing and continually create the thing and keep pushing it to the people that you think you want. No, let me rephrase that. Don't think about monetizing, right? I've had conversations with people in the past who are like app developers, and they've made products and stuff, and they've said, I didn't write this book, or I didn't make this thing to make money. I made this thing because I wanted this thing, right? And then at some point in the future, after it was made, I then went to someone who said to them, is this a thing that you would pay money for? And they've said, yeah, let me give you some money, right? Because I want that thing, right? If it's a book, if it's an app, if it's some art, if it's, I don't know, a computer mouse or something, go make it because you want it. Because if you're the core customer, you're going to see where the good points are and the bad points are. And then you'll be able to iterate on it better and make it better. Whereas if you're focusing on, I need to make all the money in podcasting, or I need to make all the money in app development, well, those two are arenas where a lot of people create lots and lots of product and hardly anyone gets paid for it. I talked earlier on about Joe Rogan, right? He has a whole team of people around him. I think we talked about it the other day, Jay, how like he'll wake up and he'll go, I got to interview someone. And then that's the end of my workday. Right? But then there's a whole fleet of people around him who help him out. And yeah, he might read the same ad readout 15 different times. and he's always talking about mattresses or headphones or microphones or whatever the new thing is, right? He'll always be talking about that. But then that's how he gets his money. Or maybe it's not. Maybe he just uses that to get his gigs for other things, right? Because that's the other thing as well, right? You can use podcasting, blogging, app development to book yourself gigs in other places. I think we kind of gently touched at it earlier on about how if you have a network of people, you have a community of people, and you're constantly putting out stuff to that community of people, well, guess what? You said it yourself. It comes back around towards you. Somebody then goes, oh, this Python thing, right? I know someone who does that. I better go talk to Jay because this other person needs help with it, or this person has an opportunity, or, you know, this person knows someone who wants to talk turkey on a podcast. Well, guess what? I know JJ does podcasts. Or, hey, I know Jamie does podcasts. Right? It's all about that network of people.
Definitely.
So with that all being said then, Jay, what are some, we've talked about a lot of things, right? What are some of the things that you would like people to take away from this conversation? What are maybe some places to go visit, some things to think about? What are the key things, the key points that you want people to take away from this conversation, I think?
I think the key point is stop trying to be productive. Just start doing a thing. You'll get better at it over time as the more and more that you try to hack your way to success. And I, again, air quotes, hack, the growth hacking movement, the knowledge hacking movement, like all of these things that people do to make themselves more whatever. I mean, you gotta think about it. There are productivity professionals out there who literally get paid. They don't get paid to be productive. They get paid to tell you how to be productive. And they get paid to tell you the exact same thing that they tell a baker, or they tell a butcher, or they tell a C-level executive. So the lessons that they teach you while being valuable also have to be very general. And you know what you need to do. You know how to do the thing that you need to do. And there will always come a time when you can go, maybe I can fix this. Maybe I can make this better. But don't do it. Don't be constantly trying to improve it. You know, Jamie and I talk about this a lot. Productivity isn't the idea of being better. It's the idea of producing. That's the root word of productive, is to produce. So if you can't produce anything because you're too busy trying to hack the act of producing it, then you're not being productive at all. But I will say this: when you do a thing, share it. Learn from the others that are doing similar things. Be open to connecting with those people. Create a community around the things that you enjoy doing. That's how you're going to break in. And at the end of the day, you have to share that knowledge, and that will help you to get better. That'll help you learn things that you may have missed. And then, of course, if you need help sharing it, you can always reach out to me, because, again, that's what I do. I help people share stuff. That should be my new tagline. I help people share stuff.
Chief sharer person.
Yeah,
that's what you should be.
chief wisdom imparter.
Ooh, I like that. Excellent. I once had someone call me a hex wrangler because, you know, I was doing some hex editing and they're like, hey, you wrangled that. You're a hex wrangler. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, okay. So how about getting in contact with you then? How do people go about getting in touch with you, whether they want some help with productivity or they want to get some help sharing something, or they just want to find out more about you, what's the best place?
Well, if you want to hear from me on a regular basis, again, I do a podcast. It's called Productivity in Tech Podcast. We also, or I should say we, the royal we here, I said it again. All right. I have a business where, again, I help developer creators with their projects, whether it's YouTube, podcasting, or just general marketing. So if you need help with that, you can go to productivityintech.com, or you can email me info@productivityintech.com. And if you just want to chat with me, Twitter's probably the best place for that. You can reach me at KJAY Miller, but remember, it's pronounced J. The K is silent.
Excellent. Okay. Any other sort of websites or posts that you want to point people at?
Oh man. Let's see. There's a few. There's this whole thing that we did called jnj.media. Like I said before, Jamie and I are good friends. We talk on a very regular basis, and we've done some shows together. We've done some shows apart, and you can actually find most of those shows at jnj.media. And there's a blog there. I think it only has a couple of posts on it, but one of those posts I really enjoyed reading again just recently when I was preparing for this episode, and it's called Your Voice, and it's really good, and I'm sure there will be a link in the show notes for that. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that I think I wrote just being silly, and at the end of the day, it really was something that it reminded me of why I do that thing that I do.
I think that sometimes the best way to put something across is to be a bit silly. I've brought him up a few times, but my good friend Zach, he says that he likes to communicate almost entirely in memes because it's kind of silly, and then you get the point that he means, right? It's why we have comedy TV shows, right? It's why we have all sorts of entertainment. It's communicating in a silly way gets the point across faster, and if you can remember the silliness, then you remember the message.
I mean, that's why they usually tell you in like any type of public speaking, you start out with a joke. It lightens everyone up. It disarms them of their criticism.
That's exactly it. But unfortunately, we may have to make public speaking a topic for another time.
Yep.
I'm not so good at it because I'm always saying which is a bane for the podcast editor. But there you go. Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much for spending some time with me this morning, Jay. I think we spent a lot longer than we were originally planning to on this conversation, but I always have loads of fun talking with you, and I hope that your family aren't too upset about me having monopolized your time so much this morning.
I mean, I think they just woke up. I heard some stuff happening in the background, but at the end of the day, again, this is what I do. This is who I am, and my family. As much as they may not appreciate it at times, hey, I gotta go. I got a podcast I gotta do. But I think that it's a wonderful way, and they often hear stories of the conversations that I have, and again, I don't know if they appreciate it or not. They're gonna hear them anyway, so.
As long as you're not forcing them to listen to you talking on a podcast in the car instead of music, then I'm sure that it's fine.
I mean, I think I've done that maybe once or twice. It's like, oh, hey, I need to review this before I publish it. Let me.
Family-based QA, I like it.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, like I said, thank you ever so much, Jay. And I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes. And you have a wonderful day. Stay safe and continue to be awesome.
Thank you. Take care.
That was my interview with Jay Miller about the ways that you can help to foster productivity and creativity with your colleagues. Be sure to check the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netcore.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave me a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/subscribe for ways to do that, and to come back next time for some more .NET Core goodness. See you again real soon. See you later, folks. The .NET Core Podcast is a production of RJJ Software Limited.